Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Oh, Miles here.
Your Outpost for the week is freshly delivered, and I am just one of the hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and with me, as she is always, Andrea Coffman.
Hello. We're both a little furrier than we were a few months ago. A little bushier in the hair department. I feel a little bit like Hermione today, with it out of control and big and bushy, but yeah.
That's why I'm wearing a hat.
Yeah, I look weird in hats. It's not going to help me. It's not going to help me at all.
I don't tend to wear hats a ton, but I've definitely worn them more. Just because I haven't had a haircut in about 200 I haven't had a haircut in about 200,000 months. Yeah,
it feels like that.
200 years.
Welcome to day 3,000 of social isolation. Welcome to 10 years in our future.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's so true. But, we did get some good news for us here, Drea. We got some new reviews over on Apple Podcasts, so we want to say a huge thank you. And we got one from I Wish I Had Swag. They said, best Harry Potter podcast around. 5 stars. So they said, this podcast is just bloody brilliant. In the 2nd grade, I read the first 4 Harry Potter books back to back and then stopped. As a grown man in his mid-20s, I have made it my personal goal to reread the entire series, and this podcast is offering the most insightful commentary to the series of any podcast I've listened to. I'm so glad I've stumbled upon this gem, and I love that it is spurring me on to read as I complete the series that I loved so much as a kid.
Aww. Yeah, well, I am glad that you found us too then, and thank you for your...
Yeah. All the feels on that one.
Yeah, there's lots of
just
awes
makes me feel great.
Yep, agreed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just so much fun. We do this for the love of Harry Potter, and, the fact that we've helped you find your love of Harry Potter again is just phenomenal. So thank you for listening. We did get one more review from JCB_56. It said, one of the best Harry Potter podcasts, 5 stars. I started listening a few months ago and have really enjoyed this podcast. I'm starting from book 1 and going from there. Great job.
Welcome to my pregnancy journey.
Exactly. Once they get here, thank you so much for listening. And we appreciate your review. And yes, the baby is here now.
She's now 2.5.
So crazy. I love it.
Sorry, I'm for whatever reason today is full of moments where I feel old. This is not a change from that either.
That happens all the time with me, So especially working with youth kids, and they'll say something, and I'll be like, "You weren't even born then."
I know, right?
So, yeah. But we are just so excited to be here. We are almost done with the Half-Blood Prince. We are on the penultimate chapter now, chapter 29, the Phoenix Lament. But before we hit up the chapter, of course, just a quick reminder that you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, and just make sure you're subscribed so you get the show as soon as it drops. If you're on Apple Podcasts, give us that star rating review like the ones we read, and we'll read out those reviews when we get them. So we just really appreciate people helping the show grow. You can find us on Twitter at Join Nerd Party. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Nerd Party. So great place to find us and like us and follow us and interact with us there. You can also find us online at thenerdparty.com, where if you go to the contact section, you can send Dre and I an email, which we get frequently, and we love that too. So all of those places are places you can catch up with us, and we really appreciate everybody who takes their time out to let us know what you're thinking of. And so... Drea, this chapter, we pick up right where we left off, of Harry, kind of kneeling at Dumbledore's side, and then somebody is telling him that they have to go, and he's not really keen on wanting to leave Dumbledore's side at this moment, but it helps that it's Ginny. And so she tells him that it is McGonagall's orders that everybody go to the hospital wing. And so Harry reluctantly agrees, and as they're on their way up, Ginny kind of tells him a little bit about what happened and the fact that, that nobody that died, it wasn't any of us, anybody and he said, but I stepped over a body, and she says that it was Bill, and she lets him know that he had been bitten by Fenrir Greyback. And so, of course, everybody is in the infirmary right now. That's one of the reasons they're going up there. And she also lets him know, which I just thought this was so sweet, that Ginny tells him this, because, and all the things that we're going to talk about, this is one of those moments where Harry had done a really good thing. He gave his friends the Felix Felicis potion, and she says, if we hadn't had that, I think we would have died. Like, everything they were shooting at us just seemed to miss. And so, Harry instinct to help out his friends in that way, and sacrifice for them in that way, paid off. And so it's such a big dramatic chapter, but that was just a really small moment where, we've talked a lot about Harry's character, and his character really paid off, in this whole point. So I really loved that here at the beginning.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that as I think about it, as I process a lot of these books again with a different lens, kind of an older lens. There you go. I'm old again. All right. We're going to lean into it. It's really looking at the difference between the good and the evil, right? And that character, and Harry using love as a weapon in an unintended way, and that the consequences of Harry's decisions are not necessarily as immediate as, say, making a decision that's more selfish, or that is more along the lines of what we see Voldemort and Snape and some of those other characters making. And this is one of those, I think, unintended ways that you wouldn't necessarily say that love was the weapon, but in this case, it was. His love and his gut instinct telling him to do the right thing and protect those he loves actually paid off in the long run as an actual sort of shield and weapon. And you know what I mean? It gave an advantage to a battle that you wouldn't necessarily think is a direct consequence of Harry caring about other people, right? And I think it's just so poetic how she continues to show the lasting impact and how powerful love is as Harry's greatest weapon. And I hate using those two words together, but that's the advantage he has. And I love how she continues to find every opportunity to show that is true. And this, and the Felix Felicis and providing it to his friends was just such a key example of that. And of how him and his instincts to be kind and supportive and care about someone else was so monumental. And so I love that. And I love that Ginny knew Harry well enough to know he needed to hear that. Because I think that's a great point. That's important too, is that, we talk about how they know each other and they're kind of cut from the same cloth and they kind of like speak a language that they understand each other. Mm-hmm. This is just another example where she knew he needed to know that and know that he made the right choice there, and that his choice actually had a tangible result on what happened, right? Yeah. Like he had an impact, because I think too often he feels like who he is and what he does is insignificant and is only based on what's the value, if you will, that someone else puts on him, right? He's the chosen one and the golden one. He doesn't always see how that plays out, but here's something he actually did and the actual consequences of what he did, for the better. And so I think it's so great that she knows to tell him that, especially after kind of delivering bad news and then giving him kind of some reassuring news on top of that, right? And it also speaks to Ginny's character and her ability to grieve and feel, but also be able to have perspective and see the larger picture of what's happening. So this moment represents so much of both of their characters here that it's one of the most beautiful parts of this chapter. And there's two more that kind of we get into these beautiful moments later on, but this is kind of the first one and the one we sort of need as readers, because it's been heavy and it's going to get heavy and going to stay heavy for the rest of the book. So grab your tissues and hang in there with us, because I definitely needed them.
Yeah, it's interesting because once we get up to the infirmary, we've got everybody there. Neville's luckily lying in bed. He's apparently asleep, so he's doing well. But Ron and Hermione, Luna, Tonks, Lupin, they're all there. Of course, Bill is there. And Madame Pomfrey's trying to do everything she can for him, but she's not quite sure what's going to happen to him because he was bitten not in a full moon. So this is apparently, they're like, we don't know if this has ever happened before. So there's nothing we know to expect. Lupin says he thinks there won't be full contamination. He's not going to become a full werewolf, but he'll probably have some definite changes, and he'll probably never completely look the same either, because he's been slashed across the face, he's been bitten. So it's not been good. And somebody mentions, like Ron mentions, Dumbledore might know something that would work. And Ginny's like, Ron, Dumbledore's dead. And this is what's so different about this than the movie, where everybody's there.
Yeah.
Whereas none of that has happened here. And like half of these people don't know that Dumbledore is dead. And Lupin just freaks out. And he's like, no, how did he die? And Harry has to go back again and tell the story about how Snape killed him. And then after that, we kind of unravel everything that happened once Harry left. And it's just an awful moment because, Harry is very matter of fact in it. Hermione is just like, it says that she kind of claps her hands over her face because she just can't believe it. Ron just is like, mouth is open. Luna is trembling. Like this is the moment when it like hits everybody like a tidal wave that Dumbledore is dead.
It's really interesting. So this is kind of the part in this chapter I sort of compare. The book and the movie are very, very, very different. Like very different. Like night and day. Like literally night and day. Different.
Yeah, one is good and the other is not.
And while I love the touching moment in the movie where they put their wands up and there's this like subtle respect, like while I really love that, reading all of this happening in the book feels so much more organic and feels so much more authentic, where people literally respond. They're finding out in their own way. Everyone's got a slightly different tale. Everyone has a slightly different reaction. And so while it maybe doesn't honor the Dumbledore character in the same way, I love that it honors every other character kind of in its own way. And it is heavy. It's heavy to hear Harry recount everything that, even if we've already read it and we already know and we have, we're comfortable with what's happened or we've had our time with it, how he presents it so matter-of-factly. And he's basically, you're literally seeing between this chapter and the next chapter, you're literally seeing Harry and most of these other characters go through the actual stages of grief. And it's hard. It's hard to watch. It's hard to process. And I think right now it's particularly hard as we're amidst this COVID pandemic, and we're going through what I read this really interesting article about how we're experiencing grief ourselves, because not just are we losing people, we're losing a way of life, right? And so really comparing that to here too, they're also losing kind of a way of life, right? They're losing a person who represented sort of a very key fixture and a hope in a battle that already kind of felt hopeless, that now it's losing a way of being for them. And watching them go through it in this chapter is hard and beautiful and sad and makes you angry. Like all of it, you get to feel all of it with them. And it takes a very skilled author to be able to get you to come along on that journey in such a way. And what I find so interesting, and I was taken aback while reading this chapter. This is kind of the first time where I think a lot of people are looking to Harry for answers, because in the past, Dumbledore may have looked to Harry for answers, and Harry may have looked to Dumbledore for answers, but there was sort of a communication there, and then all the information kind of came from Dumbledore, right? Like Harry might share something with Ron and Hermione, but never did McGonagall or Lupin or the Weasleys look to Harry kind of unquestioningly about what happened, right? He presents even the backstory about why would they, I think Tonks says it. I want to know what Snape said to Dumbledore to get him to trust him. And Harry's like, well, I know, and I'll tell you. And he just tells them, and they're just like, they take it. And that's kind of the first time this relationship and this dynamic changed. And it's going to be interesting to see, especially in the next chapter. And as we start book 7, how that continues. He's taken a different role in this group. Where when you think about the start of Order of the Phoenix, where Molly was like, they're just children, spare them. Now it's a whole new ballgame.
Something you said there that really stuck out to me, because the thing that really I thought made this so much better than the movie was the fact that we do this beautiful thing here where she has the Phoenix Lament, which is the fact that Fawkes is soaring around the castle, and she describes it as this like terribly beautiful song. And I love that kind of description, because the song is beautiful, but it feels terrible all at the same time. And so that moment, and the fact that you're just kind of jumped to the end, the song has stopped, and Harry knows that Fawkes will never return. Because Dumbledore is gone. And that's something we pick up in the whole Fantastic Beasts series, is that Phoenixes are very loyal to the one that they basically attach themselves to. And so it's just a fantastic thing that she does here, because we are honoring Dumbledore by having him be sung about by his closest friend, basically. The one who's been beside him ever since we, first got into Dumbledore's office, and we meet Fawkes for the first time in when he has his burning day, and all, like, it's just a great way to pay homage to this character. And I think just, Phoenixes have this ability of like, they have the whole connotation of rebirth, but the fact that Fawkes leaves, it's like we get this sense, no, he's not coming back.
His song is over
He is
too.
gone.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, I love the way that she just kind of does that in such a literary way to let us know that if you're reading this for the first time, Fawkes is telling you, no, Dumbledore will not be back.
Right.
In the sense, like, he is not going to return from the dead.
Right. And I even just the way she writes it, as it ties into Harry's grief. And she says, I think Harry felt that the song was like inside of him and not removed from him, was like, whoa. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think, again, what she's doing here is just so much more powerful, and it's disappointing. I think that they, to me, I feel like in the movie they kind of go for the cheap visual instead of the real heartfeltness. And again, I feel like many times in the movies they really tore away some of the best scenes for these actors to play. The end of 5, where Daniel Radcliffe should have been throwing things and like just completely pissed. And here, this moment where all of these characters should be at their very lowest, and having to be able to play and dig into that, I think is something that would have been phenomenal. Because, and again, too, we have this whole discussion about like, Snape with everyone, and McGonagall's like, I can't believe it, because Dumbledore trusted him in a way that, like, he always seemed to have this ironclad reason for trusting him. And Lupin, I think, is interesting to kind of watch him shift his tone, where he's like, he was a highly accomplished Occlumens, and it's, I mean, I know that that's kind of harsh, but we always knew that, and so, I mean, they're trying to struggle through this this idea of they don't know what Dumbledore knows, which if you've read the last book, you also know at this moment, but the listeners who are reading for the first time don't know. So there's a whole thing that goes behind all of this where there's still a story with Snape that we don't completely understand. So is he the villain, or is there something else going on? And this just leaves us wondering, because all of these characters, they don't know us either. Like, right. They're out of luck when it comes to like truly understanding the ramifications of everything. And so, and that's what moment too, where Harry mentions, like, you know, he didn't like my dad, but he also didn't like my mom. He called her a mudblood, you know, and they don't even ask him how he knows this information. He just knows from Snape's memories.
Yeah, he knows from the pensieve.
Yeah.
Well, and I find this interesting because this is also a time where, and it kind of speaks to the dynamic change where the adults are questioning themselves and what they know and each other in front of what they think of as the kids, right? Like even McGonagall goes to the extent of saying that she's trying to take fault, or she's experiencing guilt over a lot of this. I'm the one who called for Snape. I'm the one who trusted him to come fight on our side. This is my fault that this happened. And, you know, that's a very common thing for people to do, is to take more onus than they need to, especially when something has happened. And so, you know, it's so interesting to see a character like McGonagall, who's usually ironclad and stone, to have this, not just a breakdown because Dumbledore's gone, but like an expression and feeling comfortable expressing that guilt in this group, as part of her grieving process. So, you know, we have lots of, you know, questioning of Dumbledore and themselves, and they could have done this and that, and maybe what ifs. And it's just so real and insightful into each character as we go through it, and we rehash the story and every piece of it and all the parts of it, as we unfold what just happened.
I love how she just pulls a whole bunch of things together. You know, Harry, they all mention how they didn't know how the Death Eaters had entered, and Harry tells them, you know, it was the cabinets in the room of acquirement, and then they couldn't figure out what it was that, like, Malfoy had used that had just created this darkness. And Ron's like, I think it's the Peruvian instant darkness powder, which nobody can see through except for what the gift was that Malfoy got back when the second book, the Hand of Glory, which gives light to only its holder. And so they bring that all the way back. And then, you know, they talk about this huge fight that happens, you know, and how Snape, you know, apparently had attacked Professor Flitwick, and the girls don't realize that. And then they don't understand how somebody could get up to the astronomy tower, because Snape was able to pass through that, and Harry just immediately was like, I'm sure it was the Dark Mark, and that's how he could get in, and why you guys couldn't. And so this whole thing just, it's really fascinating how we kind of bring the entire full story together here, and it makes so much more sense, you know, again, reading the book, how all these things went together, and of course, how we ended up with these people being attacked, and, you know, with Bill being here in the infirmary, and what's fascinating to me in all of this, like, sadness, there's this little chunk of love that happens.
There's like two little chunks. They're like they're like backing off each other. Yeah,
and it's about two different couples in similar circumstances,
right, but they're totally different.
So great.
Yeah, and I mean, I love that not only starting with Bill and Fleur, right? I love that not only does it become kind of a love story between, or does it shift to talk about the love between Bill and Fleur, but I think it also changes the dynamic of love between Mrs. Weasley and Fleur, right? And this idea that it basically kind of comes out, you know, Fleur basically says that she still loves Bill and she's standing strong next to him. And I love how she says that she's beautiful enough for the both of them, because I just love, I love that, like, owning, she just owns it. I'm beautiful. I know it. I'm pretty enough for the both of us, you know, back off. Like, it's got this real sass to it, and I love it. But I do love too that I love it how she describes it, like without even kind of realizing what happened. Harry looks back after she offers her the goblin tiara, and they're just like crying and hugging, and it's like this whole different dynamic. It's like all of the grievances kind of got aired, and you know, they threw their punches and now they're good, and now we have a new connection between Fleur and Mrs. Weasley based on Fleur's sort of loyalty to Bill and the fact that she now has proven she truly loves him, and not just for his looks or for dashing or charming. Like, she loves Bill, and that is just so sweet and it's so touching.
I found this section entirely. It was one of the most emotional parts, you know, and I think part of it was because what is happening here is true love. Like, she does not care what her man looks like. In fact, she says all of the scars show how brave my man is. She's
so proud of him.
And she's so proud of him. But what I think it does too is it takes that character we met in you know, that fourth book, and we're like, I mean, she's fine, you know, she seems a little full of herself, but at the same time, she was also a character who appreciated Harry and what he did for her sister and everything, and
competed in the Triwizard,
exactly.
and didn't get a lot of credit for being strong and brave there.
Yeah. So here, you know, I think what she does is she shows her character. And she shows that she is more than just a pretty face. Like, yes, she may be the most beautiful woman in the world, and not just in this room, but she probably is one of the most beautiful women in the world, and yet she loves this man, and she loves his family. And what I thought was so interesting is she thinks Molly is saying that Bill won't want her anymore at the beginning. And she's like, do you think Bill won't love him? Like, she's devastated with the fact that this might, like, cause him not to love her anymore. Like, it's not that she's worried about the other way around, you know? Like, she's, like, I just thought that's so beautiful to allow her the vulnerability to be like, no, I want him. I need him. Like, and to be worried that this might change him in a way that would take that away from her. Like, there's something so beautiful and wonderful about all of that. And then again, like you said, where they make up, and, you know, it's just great. And it brings this family together in a way that you didn't expect was going to happen in this moment. And it really is. It's just a very emotional thing. And
so I love what you're saying there. And I totally read it with a completely different lens, because I almost read it as she was trying to point out the ridiculousness of Molly's statement, and that, like, she almost in the sense of, like, so you think Bill doesn't want me anymore because I don't know why you'd be questioning my dedication to him. Like, I almost read it as like she's trying to create a hyperbole story to show Molly how ridiculous her thought process is, because, like, oh, so you think he's not going to want me anymore? Because why would this change my thought process? Like, why would you think this would change me? Right? Like, that's kind of the lens that I read it through. So I almost read it more as, like, that her femininity is not frail, right? Like, she's not vapid. She's not superficial. And she's trying to call out Mrs. Weasley for treating her as such and just assuming that's who she is. Kind of going back to her character painted in book 4, and how she's strong and brave and represents an entire school in an incredibly dangerous battle, right? I almost took this as, like, sort of the statement of, like, she can be beautiful and feminine. That doesn't make her weak. It doesn't make her vapid. Like, we have somehow equated beauty with, you know, weakness now. And I almost read it as, like, this is JK's moment to point out the fact that, like, Fleur is a strong and brave, and even though she maybe isn't on the front lines, there's so much support behind those things happening. So I don't think either interpretation is wrong. I just think it depends on how you read it. But either way, I still love the insight into Fleur's character and just the relationship and how deep it is. And it's real, right? It's a real love. It's not two crazy, beautiful teenagers running off and getting married because they ran into each other on a reality show. Like it's not that, right? And not to say those can't be real, but let's be honest here.
Right.
But yeah,
well, and I wanted to say, I completely 100% agree with you, because like for me and the way I read it, it was still the fact that the strength is more than just her beauty, right? Like the strength is that she truly has this inner character, which, character is so much more than what you look like on the outside.
Which is the whole point of Bill at this point. The whole point of Bill.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So it's so great that that's kind of where we end up with both of these characters, and it just makes it really special, because, again, I think one of the things that she is able to do here, J.K. Rowling is able to do here, is to really celebrate the fact that, yes, Fleur is an incredibly beautiful woman, but that doesn't mean that that's all that she is.
That's not mutually exclusive to being a good person, too, and being a strong and brave person. You can 100%. Be both.
Yes.
You can be one or the other. They don't, it doesn't matter. Yeah, and then I do love how she ties that into the other sort of story that's happening and some of those other questions that are out there and open for us of what's been happening. Some of those little threads she's woven through this book, and I think a little bit of the end of the last one, with specifically with Tonks.
Yeah, and this is what has been going on with Tonks the whole time, is that she's in love with Lupin, and Lupin is trying to basically tell her no this whole time, and she's been saying yes, like, I don't care how old you are, I don't care that you're a werewolf, like, I want to be with you, and if they can be together, why can't we be together? And, everybody has kind of been telling Lupin this too, and I just think it's a pretty beautiful thing, because this is that moment where somebody's like, no, Dumbledore would be ecstatic that this is what's happening right now, because this is what we're fighting for, this is what keeps the darkness at bay, is the love that we have for one another. And so it really was pretty beautiful to be able to see this. And
my favorite moment from that is when Lupin, I think it's Mrs. Weasley's encouraging this, right? And is like, see, Lupin, we told you. And he says, no, she deserves someone young and whole. And I think it's Mrs. Weasley, I'm pretty sure. Her response is, those who are young and whole don't stay that way.
Right.
And so it's like,
and she wants you.
So what are you doing? Like, you're not doing, you may think you're doing what's right for her, but it's not. You don't get to decide what's right for her and not. And if you both want this and, like, go for it.
Well, and it's this is, again, McGonagall just says, Dumbledore would be ecstatic. He always thought that we could always use a little more love in the world. And this is the sad moment where Hagrid walks in and says that, he's moved Dumbledore's body, and the Ministry is basically on their way.
Mm-hmm. And all the kids have gone back to their houses. Like, we're cleaning up the chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. And so McGonagall tells Harry, I would like a quick word with you. And so he tells, Ron and Hermione and Ginny, he'll see them in a little bit, and they head up to what is now McGonagall's office, because the gargoyle just obeys her and moves out of the way. And there is now the picture of Dumbledore hanging there asleep. And so McGonagall asks Harry, I need you to tell me what you and Dumbledore have been up to. And Harry's like, I can't. And I don't think, just because Dumbledore's dead, he never told me not to obey his orders after he died. And he said, but one thing you do need to know is that Madame Rosmerta has been under the Imperious Curse, and she needs some help, and she was the one responsible for these things. And so before Harry leaves, he witnesses the conversation between these teachers talking about what they think they should do about keeping the school open. And I love that Professor Sprout is all for it. She wants to keep it open. And then you get Slughorn, where he's not quite sure, what they should do. And then I love that McGonagall's like, Hagrid, what do you think? Dumbledore has always valued your opinion. And he's like, I I don't know what the headmaster would decide, but I'm staying, and if any kids want to come here, I'll be teaching them. And she says that, she's not sure what they'll do, but the best thing for them to do is to talk to the governors to see whether or not that they'd reopen. And so it's just it's a really tough scene to see them have to talk about these things. And my favorite thing, though, is when McGonagall's like, we need to get the kids out of here as soon as possible. And Harry's like, whoa, I'm sorry, excuse me?
Hold on, I have a thought on this.
Yeah. And I think Harry's absolutely right. He brings up the fact that aren't we going to be having a ceremony for a service for Dumbledore? And all of the rest of the teachers agree with, so the kids will be staying until we have, a funeral for Dumbledore, which I think is really smart, to give them that time to be able to work through everything. And I just love, again, I think, like you said, there seems to be a new respect that everybody has for Harry in this chapter. They kind of are looking to him in some ways as like, it's not the heir apparent of Dumbledore, but they know that there's something special that the headmaster has been doing with him all year, and he has a mission to which they don't even know what it is. And so therefore his opinion matters. Like, Harry has transcended child to adult, like that.
Yeah. And what I found really interesting here, taking maybe a slightly higher view of what's happening here too, is so I've always loved the McGonagall character. And I think we talked a lot about it with the Dumbledore character, and that he was sort of flawed, and we got to see a very human side of this great man, right? You saw he wasn't always right. He wasn't perfect, didn't always make the right decisions. But I also love that we're getting a little bit of that McGonagall here too, in that you're really, I feel like this part of the chapter was just a great reflection of how collaboration and conversation and open-mindedness is so important in a good leader. She listens to the teachers, she listens to Harry, she listens to Hagrid, all of which sort of either disagree or have a slightly different opinion based on this. Well, she wanted to close the school both right now and next year, and all the teachers kind of had a varying degree of opinion on that. And being able to hear that and embody that and then action that in a way that was best kind of for a group speaks to her leadership skills and how really skilled she is. That she doesn't just walk in with the right decision and say what they're going to do and everyone's like, yay, let's go, right? It's like, it's a dissenting opinion. It's comfort. It's that she's approachable even though she kind of has a steely demeanor to her. But there's this ultimate respect for each person's opinion there. And I just love how that dynamic plays out because it shows you what a functional, healthy leadership team should be like. And I love seeing that because I feel like there's breakdowns in all of our lives on all levels, be it political or your household or school or work or whatever. We've all seen it when it doesn't work. So I love seeing when it works.
And it does, and I love that she allows Harry to leave before the minister gets there.
That's my favorite part is when he basically runs out the door. He's like, I really don't want to be here. And she's like, nope, you're good. Go. And he literally goes dashing out the door. I'm like, yes.
It's great. It's perfect because, like, why would he want to talk to Scrimgeour at this point?
Like, why would he want to muddle himself in all those And it's like, it's almost like McGonagall totally gets it. Like, I don't want to deal with this either. It's fine.
She's
I
like,
get it. Go. If I could leave, I would.
But it is really sad because, Harry goes to the common room and he has to tell the portrait that Dumbledore's really dead. She doesn't even ask for the password. She just lets him in because she's bawling. And he just walks straight up to the dormitory, and luckily Ron is sitting there, and Ron asks him, did you get the Horcrux? And he said, no, we didn't get the real one. It had already been taken. And Ron's like, he opens it up. He's like, R.A.B. And Harry's like, I don't know. And this is the moment where, like you were talking about earlier, he just feels so numb. And Fawkes has stopped singing. Dumbledore is gone. And Harry doesn't know if he'll ever feel again. Like, there's just this moment where it has hit him. Like, he's on his bed. And it's just like, it's as if the truck has finally just run over him completely. And it's a hard moment, to leave in this chapter because that is where we leave it of Harry just feeling left, like Dumbledore's he left me, and like there is this abandonment feeling, and not in that way in the sense like Dumbledore did on purpose, but there is this like there's a piece of Harry that's gone right now. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's starting those stages of grief, right? Mm-hmm. It's really getting into them and us really seeing them play out. We've had sort of shock and denial, and now we have this sort of empty and numbness that comes with sort of depression, right? It's sort of those early stages of depression with this, and it's so hard to read, but it's amazing. It's just hard because you sort of feel yourself having to feel it with them. And those are hard things to feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and it's going to be something that I think it's going to last for a while. It is going to last through the next chapter, and honestly, this kind of I would say melancholy is going to permeate the next book too, and for quite a while in it. Actually,
I don't think we're ever going to bounce back. To be honest, we're gonna have moments. Don't get me wrong, y'all. Don't stop reading. Don't stop reading and listening. We're gonna have moments of that shine through here of beauty, but I think it's really gonna teach us to really appreciate those high points or those just moments of normalcy a little bit more. This is where we really get into that, right? So
that's a great way to put it. Experience, like, and just appreciate normalcy.
Really appreciate whatever the moments of the break you can get from the what's going to happen to us here for the next 31 chapters, 32 chapters, something like that.
Man.
But the next chapter, bring your tissues, y'all, to both your reading and the episode. We're in for a intense last chapter. But but even so, in the sorrow and everything that's happening and the grief, it's beautiful nonetheless, because it just shows how much that character meant and represented to everybody. And so, it's the same for Harry. The fact that we have such a strong reaction means it was such an impactful character. So something to kind of remember from perspective.
Yeah. I mean, Dumbledore is just I think what's so fascinating is the way that he subtly grows throughout the series to be this. He is like a father-like figure to Harry. And there had been this. He had always had one step removed, but I mean, this last book, they have truly transcended, teacher and student relationship in the most healthy of ways, and in the sense of they went through life and now death together, and there's something about that. And so I think the thing that I really love that Rowling does for all of us is to help us see how we should appreciate those that are around us before they're gone, because the story is all about death and how we deal with death, and I think it brings me back to, that quote from Star Trek where Kirk's like, how we deal with death is at least as important as how we deal with life. And so death makes us appreciate life all the more. And so this is a chapter that really makes you appreciate what you have while you have it. And so, I'm excited to get to the last chapter of this book and then dive into the Deathly Hallows, our last book in the series, and just can't believe that, we made it this far. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's been, it doesn't feel like it. It's been a long journey to get here, and I'm really excited to be able to tie up all of these strings and to finish the journey with everybody. And we're not there yet, so we're talking like it's all over, but y'all still have us for like half a year. So
it's going to be great. Well, I am excited what we do have coming up next. And so, Drea, as we wrap up this book, if anybody wants to catch up with you, where can they find you?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at PCFChick or on Instagram at Drea Coffman, and it's Coffman.
And you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Vero under the name MattRushing02. I'm here on the network doing Aggressive Negotiations with John Mills. Every week we're talking about a new Star Wars topic. We've had so much to talk about, especially with the Clone Wars, Mandalorian. There's so much on our plate, so I hope you'll check that out. 2 shows over on the Trek FM network. One is called The Orb with Chris Jones, as we're talking about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. You can also find me on the 602 Club, where we're talking about all of the fandoms we love, not just one. And then last but not least, we're hoping to be back soon, who knows, with what's going on. But Cinema Stories, my good friend Courtney, as we talk about films through the lens of faith. But we want to thank you so much for checking your Outpost.
Mischief managed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.